good morning and welcome back to Reaper Pro-Tips. Here we are, me, your host, Anne, and disembodied hands and brains, Justin and John. How are you all? Yeah, it could be that kind of day. It could be that kind of day, Shadow Raven. We could do that. That's a good, marching off to war song. I'm not at war with the genie. Otherwise we wouldn't be working on her, right? But yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's Thursday. That means it's almost Friday. Ooh, I cracked the window open and now it's got cool breeze in here. Yay. Concerned about my plantlings. I repotted all of them yesterday, so we'll see if my curry tree, my baby curry tree lives. It isn't a giant pot. I showed it to David yesterday. It's this tiny little tree in this giant pot. But eventually, if I can get it to live, it will produce tasty little curry leaves for my curries. It was weird because, I used to make curries, and they were good. But then when I tried making them with the curry leaves in the appropriate ones, right away, it's a weird flavor. And, but right away you recognize it because it's like if you ever had an Indian curry, it probably does have curry leaves in it. And so you recognize, the flavor that the curry leaves bring. But apparently never tried dried ones, only fresh or frozen. Because the dried ones just don't have the flavor. All right, Genie, we're gonna deal with her butt today. All of this. We're gonna block it in. We're gonna do a lot of wet blending today. Hello, everybody. Hello, Lord Nobody. Peeps who are constantly coming into the stream this morning. So we are going to cover up that unsightly green stuff, and we are going to just block in pretty much everything else with some wet blending. So I'm going to get my carbon gray, because remember that was carbon gray plus white was kind of the deep shadow that we were using for her hair to differentiate her hair from her skin. And I liked how that worked on the front, so I'm going to continue it on the back. So I think I was going about 4-1 on that. We'll see. It might be 4-2. Whatever it takes to drag carbon gray up to a decent shadow. Genie butts, yep. I don't make my curry very spicy, but I feel that. There are days where I feel like I can't handle the spice very much. Although, you know what my new favorite chocolate is? Okay, you guys, I've got to share this. Got to, because there's so many chocolate lovers out there. So spicy chocolate, as you all know, is a thing, and there is a endangered species company bar that is, I think it's monkey. It's one of the monkeys, tamarinds maybe, and it's cherries, cinnamon, and cayenne. So it's got bits of dried cherries in it, and then it's got cinnamon and cayenne pepper, and it has a bit of a punch at the end. But oh my gosh, it's so good. I had to actually get it from Whole Foods. Nobody else carries it. So I hope it's a real thing and not just a seasonal. But oh my gosh, it's so good. Endangered species chocolate. If you look them up, like I said, I found it at Whole Foods. I didn't see it at Sprouts. But a lot of stores carry the endangered species line, but a lot of times they'll just carry a small selection, and they have a lot of flavors. My Sprouts carries a lot, but they did not carry this. I discovered it by accident. But yeah, dried cherries, cayenne, and cinnamon in dark chocolate. It's 62%, which is a little lower dark than I usually like, but it works. Probably if it was a higher percent cocoa, it would be just a little too bitter. Yeah. Nope. Actually, it's 10 or 20% of their net profits go to supporting endangered species, supporting bringing endangered species back, or protecting endangered species. I don't remember which nonprofits they support with it, but yeah, I think I went 2-1 on this because carbon gray 4-1 is still a little bit too dark. So remember from yesterday, when you're dealing with white, you don't want to ever go too dark. I may have even gone 50-50 with it. We'll see. I'm going to just add in white incrementally and kind of compare it to my front. I am thinning it a little too, and that's going to take it up. You have to think of that too. When you're looking at the light and dark of something, if you are going to thin it a lot, that's going to fade a bit. It's not going to come off as dark or as light. If you like that sort of thing, Cybestorm, I think it's wonderful. David and I instantly got addicted to it, and I had to go order 2 bars. because we fought over it. So yeah, it was really good. So, all right, let's compare that. Yeah, that's definitely, it's too dark. See, so I probably went a 1-to-1. When you always work with certain like ratios in your mixes, like I'm always doing a 4-to-1, a 2-to-1, or a 2-to-1, or a 1-to-1, it seems. So that makes it easy to dial in your mixes if you're trying to remix. Oh, you don't like cherries, Val? That's too bad, because it's really good. Really, really good. And I think the cherries actually make it a bit. I think that's part of the charm. The cherries give you that pop of sweet, and then then you got the cayenne finish. Okay, that looks much better, because yeah, when I thin that down, that's going to look a lot more like that. So excellent. That is the color we need. So 1-to-1 carbon gray, which a color which, you know, if you are going to shade white or highlight black, you should have in your arsenal. It's just a nice stormy gray. Like, it's even stormier than stormy gray. If I hadn't already named stormy gray, that would be stormy gray. Yeah, Lindt does have a dark chocolate with chilies. There are a couple companies that do a spicy dark. For some reason, though, I've always kind of been like meh on them until I think the cherries do make it for me on this one. The combo of the cherry, cinnamon, and cayenne, because I do love cinnamon. I am a cinnamon addict. All right, let's mix up our blue, which, as we know, is ultramarine blue. You could also use ultramarine highlight and not have to necessarily mix, but I like using the ultramarine because it does give me the option to keep it a little darker. Trouble! We've got Trouble resubscribing for 16 months. Thank you, Trouble. Interesting, Cybestorm. Yeah, I didn't know. I just thought it was tasty. Let's do the same. Or close. Let's try a 2-to-1 first. On this. Sometimes I like to keep it a little darker because if I know that I'm going to be wet blending with white, which I'm going to do with this today, then I know that I'm never going to quite hit that extreme of dark because I'm always going to be mixing it with white because I'm wet blending. So keeping it darker means I have a few more options if I decide to like grab some of this and glaze with it to take things down a little farther and get a little bit of a deeper shadow like around the face here and behind the arm to make things stand out. And I'm keeping my paint fairly thick, but not terribly thick. Like about a 2-to-1, I think. I might have kept it a little thicker because I am going to be going over green stuff. So I need to remember that. And we'll see how it goes. I may end up making a slightly thicker mix to do that. Actually, I think this is more going to end up like a 3 or 4-to-1. Yeah, I need to add more white, definitely. So it has actually a 4 drops mix of both of these. So a 1-to-1. But that means I've got like about 10 drops of fluid in these wells because I've got 4 drops of the white, 4 drops of the other color, and then 2 drops of water, which is always where I start out at. I always start out with 2 drops of water and then I adjust as I need to, depending on the technique I'm doing. But if I'm doing wet blending, keeping it a little stronger is good. So yeah, that's the color I want right there. Nailed it. That is the shadow color of the Genie smoke. All right. Sorry, there's like really bad allergens the last couple days here, so if I clear my throat a lot, that would be why, because the state is attacking me. It isn't trying to kill me yet, like Wisconsin does. My white is almost dead. It's a good thing I have a backup white and a backup white. two pure white bottles as on backup because I go through it so fast. Yeah. All right, we are almost ready to wet blend. Yay, ready to go. I decided I wanted to go fast on this because we've done a lot of this in pieces parts elsewhere. So wet blending the back of this, it's a really good surface to wet blend, first of all, because you've got all these swirling large shapes. And when you've got stuff like this, where you've got little separate like shapes and entities and swirls, it lends itself to wet blending. This is why wet blending is a good tool on things like ogre skin, where you can just go kind of muscle group by muscle group. Because in the shadow, you can go down to your actual, like your full-on shadow color that you've mixed, which means you can always match each shape up to the next, because you're always going down to that same color. So essentially, all of your joining parts are in the shadows, so everything looks great. You don't have to worry about like going piece by piece. Sometimes otherwise you might worry about like kind of not smooth paint job or a little bit of color weirdness. But since you're always going down to the dark shadow where you stop, you can make the parts match in the shadows very easily. So thanks, keep crying. Yeah, I mean, we're on the front. We haven't done the lamp yet. We haven't done the ground. We're mostly finished with the front. Just have a couple of gold parts that I have to bring up. But I wanted to do, wanted to get the back like all blocked in today. So we are doing some wet blending. So yeah, wet blending is very good for big areas like this. So I'm just going to use my big fat brush that doesn't really have a tip on it, because I want blends and these are big areas. I don't need to worry about a tip. So just going to put that right over. Remember, keeping your paint a little thicker over green stuff does help hide the green. Otherwise, I might have to do a couple of layers, which is fine. I am keeping it somewhat dark underneath her hair. Yeah, didn't quite cover over the green, but that's fine. We can go over it with another layer. I'm more interested in getting a nice smooth transition than I am in covering in one coat. If you do want to cover in one coat, hey crows, then you want to keep your paint a little thicker. Or you could just mix up a mixture of your ultramarine and your white a little bit lighter, put that over everything, or use a pale gray like rainy gray or something. Either one. I mean, I've as you can see, I've variably used a pale ultramarine or a pale gray under various parts of this model, and I've just kind of mixed it up because she's all ethereal. So now we'll get a little bit more persnickety with it, where we're definitely going to go in more with the gray on the hair. So on the hair, I'm just like, it's move fast. Like, I'm just going to work on this section, because whenever you're wet blending, obviously you've got to keep the area wet to progress. And so it makes sense to work on smaller sections. And I'll decide as I go if I want to wipe all the blue out of this hair or if I want to keep parts of it. You need to go fast, but not too fast. There we go. Obviously, I was able to just pause. The reason I was just able to pause and put on my glasses without stressing about it, even though I'd started a wet blend coat, is because I put a lot of paint on this model. Like, you can see how thick the paint is. Let's get this guy really in focus. And that's the key if you want to keep working a wet blend area. Now, it does work against you at some point, because when you have this much paint on the model, it can start to kind of blur together and kind of run and pool on the model. So you got to get that kind of sweet spot. And I just rinsed out my brush, by the way, so that I could kind of blend these areas without adding more paint. That's one danger. If you've got a lot of paint on your brush, if you've added a lot of paint to the model already, then your brush can continue adding paint to the equation, and suddenly you've got so much paint on the model that you have a hard time working. So you can stop and rinse out your brush at some point if you want to. And then I'm going to you have a very limited amount of time though, once you rinse out your brush and start blending these guys together, because then you're pulling the paint really thin over the surface as you do this. And as you do it, that means the paint is going to start drying a lot faster. So when you bring in your damp brush to kind of feather these edges together, you've got to move. That's where you've got to move fast, because then things have already started drying. You can't really do anything else with it. Right now I can come back to this outer edge and blend a little, but I've got to stop and let all the rest of this finish drying, or I'm going to peel up paint, and that's the doom. Now remember, the aim of this is just to set up bigger areas of light and shadow. And you'll notice that except for this edge area where I did bring in my full dark gray, you don't get a true dark or a true light in here. If you want to have a dark stay the full dark that you've got on your palette, then you need to add it in with glazes or afterwards. to accentuate it, because otherwise it's just going to mix with the white. So you're going to end up lighter. And that's why my darks here that I'm working with are so dark. It's not that I want it to be that dark on the model, although in some areas I may, if there's a deep swirl. Oh no, it's a CDOT raid. Ah, I almost missed it because I was so entranced with like explaining wet blending to y'all. All right, hey CDOT, how's it going? Thank you for the big fat raid. Hi everybody, I'm Anne. I work for Reaper Miniatures. This is our morning stream. We do it every weekday morning. Here in the central USA, it's 11:30 a.m. is when it starts. Still morning for me out on the West Coast. But this is our Genie. It's a Reaper model. She's item number there. Bobby Jackson is her sculptor. Bobby's a great sculptor. She was 3D sculpted in ZBrush. And then this is the resin copy of the model, but she also exists in, I think, both Bones and Bones Black. Am I right on that? Hello. Hello, Bandit. But yeah. Thank you, Steven. Yeah, she's, I did the skin tones with the blue to pink fade, way back when I was still working physically at Reaper. And then she sat on a shelf for forever, and I thought that the stream actually would be a great time to finish her. So we are almost done. I mean, I just have a little bit of gold on her shoulder and on her scarf to do here. Otherwise, her front is pretty good, except for we need to do the lamp still. We still need to do some of this hair. But thank you, Quindy, with the link to the model in the chat. So right now, what I had just had a whole bunch of like just blue and gray like thrown back here as a placeholder. So what I'm doing right now is I'm talking about wet blending, which is a great like fast blending technique that you can use. And it is doable in arid environments. It's a little bit harder to work with in arid environments. You do not need to add something like a drying retarder or a slow dry to your paint. It will give you more workability, but it will also impair how well the paint sticks to the model. So if you do use slow dry because you're in a really dry environment and it's hard to wet blend, just use just a little bit of like drying retarder goes such a long way, you guys. You never want to add too much of that stuff. Because if you add way too much, your paint will never dry. But yeah, so wet blending is when usually I put down the dark color. Here are our colors that we're working with today. So just 3 colors. And this is a mix of carbon gray and white. It's about 50-50. Carbon is a charcoal gray. I could have gone with a lighter gray out of the bottle, but carbon I really like because it's so close to black. It has a really heavy pigment load and it covers really well. And you want that for wet blending. So that's why I went with carbon gray plus white. Also, plus I'm adding white to it, so it covers really great anyway. And then our blue is ultramarine blue, also cut 1-to-1 with pure white, to lighten it up just a little. And yeah, I could have used the highlight for that Triad Ultramarine highlight, but again, I wanted the option to get a little bit more of a darker color in the shadows if I wanted it. So let's do some wet blending. So I was just doing this little section here, and as I explained in a moment ago, when you're doing wet blending, you're usually starting with a dark and you're mixing in a light, or vice versa. It's up to you. Everybody's got a different style. Either way, you're never going to get as dark as this or as light as this while you're wet blending, because you're mixing those 2 colors together on the figure. So in order to really get up to white or really get down to the gray or the blue, you need to wait for it to dry and then bring in a little bit of this separately. So that's what I've done up here on the top of her head, is I've brought in a lot of that white thinned down separately. So that's what we'll be doing. But I wanted to set up, I really wanted to get a lot of this stuff set up quick so that I could go in and finish it fairly fast. And wet blending is great for that because it sets up your mid-tone, your first shadow, and your first highlight. Boom, in one movement, pretty much. One fell 5 minutes. One fell swoop. But I like fell 5 minutes, actually. That sounds like demonic 5 minutes. But anyway. But I digress, which happens a lot in this show. So yeah, so starting with a dark, putting it kind of where I want it, grabbing some white just on my brush. I didn't even rinse out my brush because I want to mush these things together. I call this technique smooshing when I teach it to kids. Kids love it. So if you have a young painter or a young artist in your household who is looking at even canvas painting, actually, I mean, you can do this with acrylics on canvas. A lot of people do, just to get a quick blend. So if you've got an artistic youngster and they struggle with some aspects, the technical aspects of painting, or maybe they kind of want to highlight things, but they don't really get it yet, teach them smooshing. Smooshing is the best. My youngest student ever that I tutored was 11. And I taught him smooshing, and he went on to win a Youth Golden Demon, like, that year. So, smooshing, it's a good thing. We like smooshing. Because it can be fast, right? It can be, and I'm putzing with it a little bit now, because I'm talking to you guys, and I'm thinking more about what I'm saying than what I'm doing. Yes, one swell foop. Exactly, Valandar. So yeah, so let's just talk about technical stuff then, and I'll stop being so chatty for a moment. So all right, so I set up this area, I kind of set up that area, I'm a little bit rough in that area, but I need to wait for it to dry, because if you go in too quick while your paint is like in the process of drying, you're going to strip up this paint. That's the risk, right? So now that it's dry, I can go in and kind of blend those two areas. So I'm using kind of a mixture of layering and wet blending. My layering is very, very blocky though. Like, my paint is really thick, so it's not really... the only reason it's blending is that I already have a nice blend there to power it off of. But you can bring in your light first if you want and pick up a little bit of dark. It's just that I find that the dark is a little overwhelming for the light. Good and evil, you know, like, parallel there. At least at first, until good, like, manages to get its crap together. So because of that, I tend to go dark first, and then I can load a bunch of white into it and get the effect I want. I'm using the edge of my brush here to just kind of smush these two colors together, and so you get a nice blend there. And it's not a perfect blend, and it's, you know, and it, like I said, it never goes up all the way to your light, and it never goes down all the way to your dark. But it is a great starting point, because then you can introduce more of a dark and more of a light in the places that you want them. So if I want more light down here, I can also reblend if I feel like it. If I feel like I didn't quite catch it the first time, it's fast, so it doesn't matter. Like, if I feel like I kind of missed this shadow right here, I can bring it back in. And as I mentioned, if you want to get it a little brighter, you see it's not really blended, I can rinse off my brush and come back with a damp brush and just kind of use the tip to smoosh these together. As long as both colors are still wet, that will work, and then you get a beautiful soft blend. So it's super, like I said, it's super fast compared to layering it. It's very fast. So let's get this dark down here. And I'm putting quite a bit of paint on because you want to put enough paint on for it to stay wet long enough for you to work it. Yeah, exactly. A lot of people's kids start wanting to paint minis or canvas with them when they're like 5 or 6. And so, you know, they tend to smoosh without even trying to smoosh. But if you can teach them that technique early and then they have, you know, a few years to play with it, it'll stand them in pretty good stead. It's a very useful technique. I always say it's an optional technique. Like, you don't have to learn wet blending to be a good painter, but it's a great tool to have in your toolbox, especially if you want to work faster. So here again, I've got a damp brush I rinsed out, and I'm going to work these two colors together at the edge where they overlap to get a nicer blend. And sometimes I'm going to fail. Like, if there isn't quite enough paint there, maybe I'll have to come back into it. The other thing that helps if you're doing smooshing is lay down a base coat first. So, like, if you were doing miniatures with your daughter, then maybe do an airbrush base coat of a color she likes, and then give her the model and say, paint over it, and smoosh, you know, and that way it covers. Because the only downside with wet blending sometimes is that if the paint isn't thick enough, it will not completely cover. Kind of like I wet blended down here, and you can still see the green stuff. Actually, that's dry now, so let's pop over that again. Patience is sometimes just, you know, a virtue in this hobby. I'm not in a hurry to cover up this green stuff. I just want to get a nice smooth. I am happy that my green stuff work did turn out really smooth. Like, I can only see a tiny bit of roughness. So it's not very apparent. So that makes me happy. So I blended it into the surrounding sculpt pretty well. It always makes me happy when I do something good with green stuff because I am not a master. Not at all. CNOT is so much more of a sculpting master than I am. Painting is my forte. Painting is where I'm at. Yeah, exactly. They just dip it in paint, right? As long as they're having fun, it doesn't matter. Like, there's so much time for people to get judgmental of their work, right? And so when your kid hasn't yet learned that horrible thing called being judgmental, like, let them just play, right? I mean, It's how they have fun, and they're learning. They may not look like they're learning, but they are. They're absorbing stuff. Okay, now that was dangerous because this is starting to dry already, and I brought a color back into it. So now I have to be very careful with my damp brush and see if I can blend it in. Yeah, it's a little bit touchy. I'm going to pull off. Even though I didn't get a good blend there, I'm just going to pull back because when you start seeing that everything else is drying around it and you add a brush full of paint, you're doomed. Like, the outside edge here is going to be drying as you're trying to paint into it, and that's the danger time where you can strip it up and make lumps and clumps and have pits in your paint job. Just don't do it. Just stop. Just stop and go back and blend it again once it's dry. Don't try to push. Wow, HM Road Dog, with the Prime sub, too. 19 months, thank you. We appreciate you immensely. All right, let's bring this over here and let's really go up. Now, I should be using some pink with this, and there's a reason I'm not. Because this is technically, looks like it might be her skin, just like the front of the leg here, which is definitely brought up with pink. But this sort of blending you need to do with layering. And the reason is, if you're transiting from one color to another, and they're very distinct colors, in this case, ultramarine blue to kind of magenta pink, if you try to wet blend that, you're just going to make purple. It's not going to look quite right. So if you want really that to look like the highlights of the skin are pink and the shadows are blue, you need to use like a dry over wet blend instead of this wet to wet blend. Like, there's definitely things that you can do with wet blending that are harder to do or longer to do with layering. And there are things you can do with layering that you cannot do with wet blending. So you have to ask yourself what your immediate goal is and work from there. For me, my immediate goal is to get a nice blend from the shadow here on up to kind of the light blue that I've got going on in the midtones here. And then I can bring my pink in and add the highlights up on the butt here. Yeah. Just making sure I'm not missing any questions in chat. I do a lot of interaction with chat in this stream if you are new to me. All right, I'm going to try to blend this one more time, and then we'll go back to the hair. Just because I want to cover up that green stuff. I am going to keep this this butt cheek pretty much in the shadow, because this big, massive hair is right over the top of it. You can even see the shadow that drops over it, you know, when I've got the mini positioned, right? So there's a big shadow there. So we gotta I'm going to kind of work with that. I may not keep all of it, but at least I'm going to work with it at first. And then I'm going to bring this other one in, and I'm really going to hit it hard with the white. Really hard. And then I'm going to come back in with my damp brush and blend that in. So damp brush, I just kind of wick it off a little bit on my pants, or my towel on my pants, depending on if I've remembered to put a towel on my pants. My pants suffer so much when I paint. Happily, it's always like when the brush is just wet and not full of paint, well, most of the time. So this is a little bit too much paint. It's kind of flowing and going kind of weird. That means that I've added just a bit too much paint. I am going to pick up a tiny bit of ultramarine though, because I want this edge to stay wet. And what I'm going to do is kind of use my brush to pull the paint down the leg, so that I can pull some of that pooling paint off of that surface and keep working. And if you want to work for a long time with your wet blends and not worry about it drying, that's what you have to do. You have to continually wet the edge so that you can continue working without worrying about stripping up paint. Here I'm going to run into problems, though, because I've got too much of that ultramarine on my brush. Once again, kind of take it. You could tap it off on a paper towel, too. Just try to use a towel or something that doesn't have fibers. I don't like paper towels because they tend to have fibers and transport them into the paint. So now you can get into a little bit of trouble if you don't watch out here. You just got to keep an eye on how things are drying. See, now this is starting to dry, and see, I'm starting to get a brush stroke. I don't want that, so I'm going to stop and pull off. So this is where wet blending is not ideal, right? Like, this big broad surface, honestly, I'll be able to get better results with layering, but at least I'm able to set up something that I have a highlight, I have my shadows. So when I go back in with my pink, I'm going to have some basis to work it off of. I do not like drying retarder, Shadow Raven. Drying retarder is useful if you're in a very arid environment, but even that, like, yeah, there you go, Shadow Raven. So, all right, I don't like retarders. I tried using slow dry back in the day. I do not like it. We have a drying retarder with Reaper. I do use that really rarely. Like if I'm in Santa Fe where it's really dry in the high desert, I will put a tiny bit in my paint wells, but a tiny bit, because any additive or retarder is going to change the character of the paint. It's going to change how the paint feels. It's going to change how the paint acts. It's going to change the finish of the paint. All of that. So I don't like the feel that it gives, and I don't like the sheen that it leaves. So I tend to not use it. And frankly, Shadow Raven, it wouldn't necessarily help with this. I feel like sometimes it even might get you in more trouble. It's really, if you're going to use it, you need to use it consistently so you get a real feel for how to work with it. Because right now, you know, after all these years, I have a really good feel for how to work Master Series with this kind of application. And so the minute it starts to dry or starts to look a little suspect, I notice and I pull off. But with any kind of slow dry or drying retarder added, I don't have that gut feeling anymore. And it can go stringy. So for me, it's more work than if I just use water. But I mean, drying retarder, I mean, it does it doesn't make your paint into oils, right? It does allow you a little more work time. But I mean, I had a lot of work time there. You're just not going to get perfect blends with wet blending. Like you shouldn't try, because it's going to take you forever. Like if you do it, it's meant as a quick setup, and then you go back in and then you fine tune it with layering. And world-class painters like Marika Reimer do exactly that. She uses wet blending to set everything up, but she's not aiming for a perfect blend. She comes back in with layering to achieve that perfect blend after she has the majority of her base work done with wet blends. So she's able to paint very quickly because she sets up everything beforehand, and then all she has to do is come back in and layer her highlights. You know, she's got it. And maybe a little extra shadow. So that's kind of like, and she doesn't use retarders. So really, retarders may help by giving you more open time. I guess the end note of what you've asked is retarders may help by giving you more open time, but you may still have a problem with getting a perfect blend because wet blending often won't give you that. And it's because you don't have control. Because wet blending is a lot like watercolor. Hey, Red Links, how's it going? Wet blending is a lot like watercolor in that you get happy accidents, and then you have to work with them. It's different from watercolor in that with acrylics, you can just go back over it if you don't like it. You just need to wait for it to dry. But that's where wet blending can start to take a lot of time. Like, if you just, like, go for a decent blend that you can work with and work off of that, wet blending can be very fast. It can be a great speed tool. But if you're trying to do everything with it, it can actually slow you down a lot because it is difficult to get great blends, especially on little areas and on really big flat areas like this. In those areas, it's easier to get a good blend with using just thinned wet paint over dry layering. So my bottom line on the additives is if you want to try a drying retarder or a slow dry, feel free. Remember, it will change your paint's feel just a little bit. And work with it. If you like it, if it works for you, it's always the same on this stream. If something works for you, even if it doesn't work for me, do it. But my experience has not been like, if you're just trying to use it to get a perfect blend, good luck, because you're still going to have the same problems, the inherent faults that wet blending has, like the weaknesses per se. And so you're still going to have to work with that. You're going to have more time to work with it. Maybe it will give you better results if you have an aptitude. It seems like, to me, I find that some people take to wet blending really fast. Like that kid that I taught, that 11-year-old, oh my God, he got it. He nailed it instantly. It was like his favorite thing. It's taken me a lot longer to be comfortable with it. So that's why I tend to tell people it's not a necessary technique. I do that because I don't want people to get frustrated and sad if they can't nail it right away. You don't need it. You can do everything with layering. It may take you a little longer, but you can. So just trying to get this nice little round blend here. But wet blending is a tool. It's a tool for your toolbox. So you should always embrace extra tools because you never know when you might need one. So if you have the time and the inclination to get better at wet blending, I highly encourage you. It is a really, really useful thing to know. Yeah, so again, I'm not going to get a perfect blend here, but what I have gotten is like this hair kind of mapped out nicely so that I can go in later with my white and I can kind of follow and improve on things with layering. And I'm going to, get all of this mapped out in about an hour. So very quickly, relatively speaking. Maybe I could, if I wasn't explaining and stopping and talking to you guys about this, I could easily do this hair probably in 20 minutes, maybe 15 if the paint really loved me. 25 if the paint hated me. Remember, it's not a fad, it's a style, Clavicus. We changed that terminology yesterday. Hey, Paint Station. Paint Station, I don't, but Reaper people are on the stream here. So Justin and John, if you missed that question, Paint Station wants to know when we are allowing in-store shopping again. I was in Denton for like 17 years, Paint Station, but I moved to the West Coast last year. So I am now remote. I'm Reaper's first truly remote employee. But yeah, the guys there can answer your question. Yeah, right, Shadow Raven. Not styles. Not fads. Styles. Let's rebrand it. The words that come out of your mouth matter. Or out of your typing fingers. But yeah, like, there's no one right way to paint. The answer is just lies in your results, right? Mess around. Make mistakes. Learn stuff. See how you can improve. Don't listen to everybody else, Don't even listen to me. All I can do is tell you how it works for me and my own experience. And I'll tell you, there are plenty of painters in the world who are amazing painters who paint nothing at all like me. So, in fact, I'm a weirdo. I am the oddity in the world as far as painting. I think I probably do things like differently because I was self-taught. Because when I started, like, the internet didn't have all these resources it has now for mini paintings. So I was like having to reinvent the wheel a lot. A lot of us were around that time in the late 90s and early aughts. So a lot of people were just kind of figuring out what worked for them. We didn't have all these great videos and stuff. Now we do, but a lot of us are old and set in our ways. But yeah, I still try new things. Like whenever I try to learn techniques and ways of thinking about painting, especially at this point in my career. It's like the ways of thinking about the hobby. It can be very valuable to you. If you're already like pretty good, then thinking about things differently can really be the opening up point for you to learn some new things and maybe switch up your style a little bit. Because nowadays, like I said, it's very easy to get into the way that you've always done it. But if you can like kind of think about your art a different way, that can really boost your creativity. I'm just putting some white over the top of this and then taking a damp brush and kind of blending it in. So now I'm wet blending with water. I'm putting the paint on, then I'm coming back with not a wet brush, just a damp brush. You don't want a lot of extra fluid. And I'm kind of doing that. So there are lots of different ways to use this sort of technique. And what you're really trying to do, what you're really doing here is you're getting a really good understanding of how to work with the wetness of the paint. Like how far can you push it? How long can you work it? Like with water, with other paint. That's a nice soft look. That's the other thing wet blending will give you is a beautiful soft look. It may not be perfect blends everywhere, but it will look like really just soft and flowing, which is a great style on its own for something like this Genie. So now I'm bringing in some more white. Now I may use a tiny. Now, what I'm doing here, because I wanted a higher highlight on these strands up here, is I'm taking some of my white, after I put my white down, I'm taking my brush over and picking up a tiny bit of gray, but I'm mixing it into a middle gray up here before I start wet blending with it. So that means I'm essentially wet blending then with a slightly lighter gray, which is going to give me a slightly different result, a lighter color, right? So this is a more versatile technique than just the way that you might see it out the gate. And there is like so much room for like reinterpretation, like kind of using the water thing to feather in the edge of the paint. You can pull up the paint there, and that can be problematic. But I mean, the nice thing about acrylics is, as we said earlier, you can always go over it. You can always paint over it. The key is not to use a lot of thick paint. A lot of people worry about building up too many layers of paint and losing detail. But if you work your paint a little bit thin, and this is why putting down a base coat is so useful, before you wet blend. But you can work your paint thin, and then you're not going to lose your detail. Like, you would have to put so many layers of paint on this sucker to lose detail with it. You do want a fair amount of paint in your brush, though. At least amount of water. Like, as I make small mistakes, I'm essentially narrating to you guys. When I get too little paint in my brush, that's when I run into issues. Too little moisture in your brush. All right, that'll be good for now. Let's get down to this area. But yeah, you can see where areas where I've added in more white after the fact are lighter. This is your straight up wet blend. It still gives us, what it gives us is nice shadows, and then I can play with this. All right, let's see here. Oh, Valandar, have fun. I hope your errands are good. Too many resources, right? Right. Hold on. Oh, store open by ReaperCon. Was that the answer? I like to kind of keep track of what the Reaper policy is at the moment so I can answer questions. Okay, current store is closed. Building. Yeah, right. We're remodeling it. The new game store. Builders and contractors in the city. It goes on and on and on. Yep. Hopefully the new store will be open by ReaperCon. Big fingers crossed there. But yeah, Reaper bought into the new plot and is expanding greatly, and you get a whole new game store out of it. So, joy, right? All right, let's get some of this dark in here. Kind of a storm cloud dark. I'm trying to leave dark areas like really for the heavy shadow areas. Like, I don't want to be this dark up on most of this, especially not the stuff up near the top where the light is going to be falling. But the underneath of things, I've been putting darker shadows on. So once again, I put a fair amount of paint on that. You can kind of see how wet it is. Now I'll start working it in. Now again, I'm going to take my brush and squeeze the water out of it and just kind of blend, feather the edges here. I blend in the edges. This is it needs a light hand, light, delicate touch on this when you're blending in edges. And I've got a little bit of my blue showing through, but that's actually kind of cool, and it's kind of like her, so I'm going to just keep it. This is also the point where I really need to be using my bubble wrap to hold the model so I don't rub paint off, because I've gotten paint is scraped off back here, mostly because it's been resting on the paper. So this is the point where if I don't want my paintwork to suffer, I definitely want to hold it in something soft. I could use a holder for her. She's not terribly big, but to get to all these areas comfortably, I find it's actually more comfortable for me to actually hold her. So we just use your soft bubble wrap. You kind of wrap it around the model gently, and then you have a nice handle. Very comfortable, very soft. No abrasion, so it's not going to rub off anything. And you can hold the model comfortably. I use this on all the bigger models I work on. Even like huge statues. Especially huge statues. Actually, my weight loss program I'm working on says that practice is progress, Daffodwear. Which actually, I really like that. I think it needs to be a mini painting statement too. Practice is progress. Oh yeah, I painted with testers the first time I painted too, Clavicus, because my brother and I did like model cars, like we had some model cars. And so we had the testers paint. Otherwise, I kind of wish that I would have started, because I had some oil paints with paint by number kits. I kind of wish I would have tried that on mini painting as a kid. I wonder where I'd be if I had. would have given me an entirely different introduction. This little swirl thing needs to be lighter. Lighter swirl thing, another lighter swirl thing. There. So those are a little blocky because I'm not blending as great. Now, when you get down to smaller areas where you feel like this brush is too big, do switch it up. I like to use a fairly large brush for wet blending, but when you're getting into tiny areas, you definitely do need to switch it. It'll help you a little bit. So the problem with using a smaller brush for wet blending is it doesn't carry as much paint. So you maybe have to work smaller areas. If you're working big areas, use a big brush is what it comes down to. Let's get a little water in my... Maybe. I would certainly be more familiar with oils on models, right? Even James doesn't get like super smooth blends on a lot of stuff though. I mean, wet blending, whether you're oils or acrylics, does have sometimes it's difficult. Especially on small things. It's harder. I used to hate acrylics. This is the great irony of my existence. When I was working with canvas when I was a kid, taking like 4-H painting classes, art classes, and stuff like that, I actually detested acrylics because I couldn't get them to blend, but I just didn't understand the fundamentals. Nobody had taught me smooshing. So that's why I say if you have kids who like to paint, teach them smooshing because it could be a great tool for them. You know, and if you like, you can, give them some oils and have at it. But a lot of kids don't like working with oils on figures or things like that because it's like everything smushes together and it turns brown essentially. So I think acrylic smooshing is maybe a little bit more forgiving for a kid because they can smoosh and then it dries and they have their smooshed surface. But who knows? Everybody's different. So maybe there are kids out there that would really love to work with oils on figures. It doesn't dry right away either, right? So it's also problematic that way when you've got a small child and they might not understand that. I mean, I learned it with my paint by numbers, but a lot of these days paint by numbers are acrylics for the most part because turpentine is not, a great thing for kids to be handling. Unlike when I was a kid, where they just threw out toxic chemicals at us and figured we'd deal. Explains so much, right? Change is not always progress. I mean, you're progressing to somewhere. You may just not be progressing to a better state, right? Yeah. I'm adding some water to my white. I may regret this. But I'm to the point close to this where I'm going to start layering my white. And so I do want it a little thinner. So I'm kind of testing my how dark and how light my area is here by doing a little bit of layering in that I am putting this white thinned over the darker colors that I had. Made a little bit of too much of an angle there. I can still wet blend with this, but I've got very little paint on the model. And that's a big difference right there. That's a core difference between wet blending and layering. With layering, you have very little paint on your brush. You never want a lot of paint on your brush because you want control. With wet blending, you want an overload of paint on your brush because it gives you that initial layer to blend everything into. If you put too little paint on your brush, it's going to dry right away. That's the plus in layering because by the time I lay one layer down, the next layer is like it's dry. Like the next layer is ready to go on right over the top. So quickly layering a lock of hair there. Now we've got kind of a little bit of blue left here on the side and front that I want to wipe out. I'm going to switch back to my big brush and then we'll have blocked in all of our hair so that I can start turning it white instead of gray. Smoosh. Smooshing is what I call wet blending when I'm talking to kids. Or when I'm talking to not kids. Smooshing. It's a technical term. Smooshing equals wet blending. Because you're smooshing two colors together on the model. Like I said, it has things in common with watercolors because it is fraught with peril and you will sometimes get happy accidents or unhappy accidents. But on the happier side than watercolor, you can actually correct it by painting over it. So, quick wet blends. These swirls are a little small for this brush, but I'm going to try it anyway. I'm actually just going to go over it with a light gray. A little bit more of that and that. Just kind of want to wipe out most of the blue. If I see hints of the blue in the hair, I don't mind so much. And also not having the pure white, like the fact that we're smooshing the colors together means that we won't have any area be like really pure white, but that's good because that leaves you the room to suggest texture, like I am up here in the hair. So you do want to end up with a color in your quote unquote highlights from your wet blend that you can still put that pure white over and see a difference. So that's big dabs and it's a lot of paint on here. I'm going to take my brush and gently blend the edges. So that's a lot. And that white is also really thin. So there's a lot of fluid on the model, which is definitely fraught with peril. There we go. That's better. And that does it for the most part. Let's grab the back of this here. Doop. Doop. And then we're going to go and start layering. Oh, actually, I'm going to bring down some of the blues down here. So we've managed to set up all these great swirls and blend things in at least a little bit. It's given us a starting blend, what I call a starting blend. So now when you go over it with layering, you already have part of a blend there. So you can just, it makes your layering blends a little bit easier because you've already set up a good surface that's already partially blended. Oh yeah, fingers crossed. I definitely did have a reaction, love, but it wasn't like bad. Like I had a fever, I just kind of felt meh. So I was not feeling like great for a day, but after a day it went away. Fingers crossed. I know other people who have had reactions and that you thought you had one. So big fingers crossed. That's right. Yeah. Hopefully your immune system adjusted to it, right? Crossed. Yeah. Alrighty. Let's see here. What are we going to do? We're going to do our blue blends really quick. Let's do our blue blends. Blue blends. So I went really heavy here. I'm going to try one more time on this hip to see if I can get a little smoother. And the real thing here is going to be a lot of paint fast. So, but I'm going to start out with a fairly small amount of blue, and then I'm going to do a lot of white. So blend that in. That blended nicely. Sometimes you also want to kind of blend from the inside out, where you make one layer of blending, and then maybe your next layer doesn't go out quite as wide. The white is really strong, even though it's really thin. I'm going to bring back a damp brush and kind of layer that in. Sometimes it's also just that that you need to add slow dry, but just that you need to like go slower and wait till you get lucky. Like this really it's a world of happy accidents when you're wet blending. Like you sometimes just have to try it till it works. Because sometimes you'll try it and you'll just have too much paint on the model and you'll be like, grr, grr. And then you'll try it again a few minutes later and it'll work. Like there. So now I've got a better blend to set me up with, and that's okay. I like that. So we'll work with that. When I come in with the pink, to get that to work a little bit better, we shall see how it goes. Now I pretty much have to hold her by the head. Boop. While I'm painting the bottom. So I've just switched my bubble wrap. And I think I probably do need to get my my white a little bit stronger. The problem with thinning my white is I'm all ready to do the hair now, but I still have more wet blending to do down here. So that's not going to work so well. So I think I will mix up a new puddle of white. I'm going to bring this up, and then I'm going to use a damp brush again to feather in the edges here. When you feather in the edges like this, you do have to move pretty fast because the edges will start to dry first. So you can get yourself in trouble. Mostly I'm going to cover this area with just a pale blue, I think. I'm not going to do a lot of wet blending out the gate because I recall that I got more mileage out of kind of layering in my darker shadows like while I was painting the light pastels. So I think I'm not going to blend as much here because I am going to be putting colors on top of this. And I remember that I got good mileage out of layering later rather than earlier. So I am going to block in some of the shadow down here though, on the front and the back. Yeah, Bandar, same with me. Yeah, my arm was really sore on the second one too. But hey, it's now actually this Sunday, it's 2 weeks since I got my second shot, so I am considered fully vaccinated. David will be fully vaccinated tomorrow. We are celebrating by going into the city on Saturday to have lunch at a nice place and do some walking in the parks. Oh, Love and Music, since you're in the Bay Area, I also wanted to say we're going to start reaching out with our friends in this area and seeing if we can, like, when people are going to be comfortable getting a paint club together, like a real in-person paint club. I'll keep you in the loop if you're interested, where we all just kind of get together and paint. Our paint club got canceled because of COVID, and then, you know, the store that we were hosting it at also went, you know, decided to close during the pandemic, so I don't know where it'll be, but you could hook up with other painting geeks if you can get an evening free. All right, cool. Yeah, if you're in the Bay Area and you're a painter, there is a Bay Area mini painting Facebook page. And I'll probably start the discussion up on that if somebody else hasn't. In the past, that has been other people who are kind of organizing the paint club, not me, which is nice and refreshing for a change because I've always had to start the paint club wherever I've worked or lived before. So we'll see what we can get going. But I kind of really want an in-person paint club again. I miss it. All right, got just some wet blending. Again, I have done a little wet blending, and see I've smoothed everything out. Still have a couple of areas to cover over. That got a little bit of rub off. Clever, you're funny. We did that the other week. We did mask up, but we went to the liquor store to get some wine for cooking because I cook a lot, and we needed. I wanted to try a really nice dry marsala. I make chicken marsala, and David really likes it. So I wanted to actually get a nice dry marsala instead. The stuff you can find in grocery stores tends to be the sweet variety, which I like, but the dry was definitely more complex and more interesting when I made the dish. So we got some of that. We got some port because I like to make duck, and port can do a really nice pan reduction. Sauce for duck. So we actually bought as much wine to cook with as we bought to drink. It used to be here in Mountain View, Fistity. fist in your face, but now I'm not sure. They were looking at other. We usually the place to hold it usually is a game store. So now it would depend on finding a game store that had enough room for Paint Club. Because the Bay Area Mini Painters has always been actually one of the larger clubs in the nation. So if you are in this area, you actually have that resource. The fact that there are a lot of really good painters here, and also just painters who like to teach, and just, you know, painters who like to get together and paint together, which I think always makes it fun. So if you stick here, I'll probably like talk about it if we get something moving soon. I'll probably talk about it on stream, or like I said, if you're on Facebook, you can join Bay Area Mini Painters group, and I'll post on there as well. Much as I'm not a Facebook person anymore, I do use it for organizational purposes sometimes because it's handy. And I'll probably also announce it on my Patreon, which is actually, it's stretch time. So let's get up and stretch, and I will mention my Patreon. Let me just actually blend that little bit that I did right there. So I have a Patreon, and it's cool. And I haven't been having so many technical difficulties this month. But my Patreon is cool. It is patreon.com/paintingbig. And I do, the $5 level is all about Master Series paints. So if you're curious about the paints I'm using, I do a whole level about, you know, using them and what to use to shade and highlight them, and, you know, what the various colors are useful for and things like that. And then I have like $2 and $10 levels that are videos about technique for the most part. How to paint. So yeah, head on over there, check it out. I have a couple of little free things too. Some PDFs, a couple of videos, although the videos are older, so they don't have the awesome setup that my newest videos have, but still useful, I think. So here we go. Let's have you look at Genie while I do a stretch. It is stretch time. It's stretch break. Quality of life. Can a paint club lounge. Yeah, when I used to have paint clubs at people's houses, there was alcohol involved. I will not lie. Although that's where the slogan of the Illinois Miniature Painters, the IMPS, Illinois Miniature Painting Society, came up with friends don't let friends paint drunk, and friends don't let friends drink paint water. So, all right, stretch, people, stretch. If you've been sitting for as long as I have, please remind your spine that it can stretch. And your shoulders, your poor shoulders. Do a stretch, stretch, stretch. I like to do the above the head stretch. It's good. It feels great after sitting there in a C shape for a while. And then behind the back stretch. Also grab a drink. You know, get up, move around. Yeah, HM Road Dog. Yeah, chicken marsala is tasty, tasty. And yeah, the dry is more complex. Like the sweet has a certain... I have a sweet tooth, so the sweet does appeal to me in a way. But the dry was definitely really good when I made it this last time, so. Yeah, the problem with painting drunk is you lose your coordination, but you also might like try interesting things. I don't know. I don't drink much anymore because my guts can't handle it. And I've never smoked. I've just never been into it. So I don't know. To each their own. Stretch. Okay, I'm going to do my floor stretches real quick and then we'll be back. Alrighty, stretches accomplished. That didn't take long at all. Oh, so for those of you who are like me into Overwatch, the video game from Blizzard, they're doing a webcast today on Twitch and YouTube about Overwatch 2, which is coming up. I think it's slated for next year. So for anybody who's interested, I am, of course, going to be stuck to the TV watching that. Don't forget to hydrate. All right. We've had our healthy break. Now we can go back to painting. Yay! Oh, yeah, for sure. Operating construction machines plus, yeah. Plus not being all there. For sure. All right, let's encase the genie in bubble wrap again and work on this. I actually really like how this kind of swirling blue mass is looking now, but now we need pink. We need pink. I could work on the hair, but you know what? We worked on white hair yesterday. You guys would probably be bored silly, so let's do some pink. So I'm going to use Runic Glow, which is a beautiful, cooler magenta-y pink. It is a little bit too dark out the gate for doing the swirlies here. You want your pink to be lighter. You can see how light that is. So I am going to add some white to it. I'm going to strengthen up my white as well so that I can kind of highlight it, but we're going to do this kind of effect on the back as well. So let's get some pure white. Yeah, it's people's lives. They're going to live them. Best you can do is set a good example. Like, really, the best thing you can do is to just live your life the way that, you know, fits you. Like, I gave up trying to get people to do stuff long ago. They're humans. They're as bad as cats. You cannot herd them. Best you can do is to do the best with what you have, is my firm conviction. Alrighty. Well, let's get a nice firm grip on the genie head. Actually, I'm going to turn this bubble wrap around. There we go. Nice, big, soft cushion encasing the genie. It is kind of nice to hold, to be frank. It is very comfortable to hold it this way. Now, Shadow Raven. I think you are a good example of some things despite yourself, Shadow Raven. You may not think so, but I think that, you know, you do face the world with a sense of humor, and that is so important. Even if you feel like, you know, you're not aspiring to great big things. So Hellspawn, this is what I do when I'm working with a big or heavy model. Usually I'd put something on a base, right? I'd use sticky tack and I'd put it on a holder. So small models, I use these 1-inch blocks. I also do have like big blocks like this, and she would definitely fit on the big block. But the problem with this is my hands are small, and it's also got edges, so it's not nearly as comfortable to hold. So for bigger stuff, and of course some models like dragons, right, they're just way too big for any block or holder. So I got into the habit of using a bubble wrap, and this is the really soft, squishy bubble wrap. It's not stiff at all. It's the really, really soft stuff, because it's totally non-abrasive. It will not rub paint off your model at all. It's like, that's the surface. And it's soft, right? It gives you that air cushion. So when you might otherwise rub paint off on the edge of something because of the pressure of your hand alone, the cushion that the air gives you means you won't. So when I'm painting like a big dragon body, I'll just lay the bubble wrap in my hand and kind of cradle the dragon in it. But with smaller big models like this, I can actually just hold it. This is resin, so it's not as heavy, so I don't need to cradle it. But that's why. It's because it's a soft cushion that doesn't rub the paint off your model. It makes it easier and more comfortable to hold. So that's why. I got in the habit of doing it long ago. I painted a 12-inch tall statue, Soldier 76 from Overwatch, and I ended up having to just wrap all of his legs. Like, I painted his pants first, and I wrapped him all in bubble wrap, and I was just painting his jacket, then holding the legs wrapped in bubble wrap, and in that way I managed to not damage any of the work that I'd done on his legs and boots. So yeah, I mean, we all get little life hacks like this, right? As you learn, you try something weird and it works, and you're like, oh, this is the best thing ever. So yeah, bubble wrap is kind of my thing. It's what I do. It works for me really well. Yeah, people need to change their own lives. It's enough work changing our lives without trying to change everybody else's life. Like, I have so much energy that I try to invest in, like, making myself a better person. I don't have any left over for other people. uh. You are wise for your years, love of music. All right, let's see here. Let's get... Oh, I need to make my brush. Always make your brush, if you're working with thin paint, get your brush wet before you dip it in the paint. Do squeeze it out, but you want a little bit of moisture in there. It helps to keep your paint wet when you're using so little paint on your brush. Let's see here. So we're starting with pink. We're going to have some pink up there. These little bits are going to have to be pink. I was using kind of a stippling stroke, which is a dab, 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 dab. Little dots. Boom. Little dots. You can see the little dots, right? And what that does is it gives you kind of this kind of faded in misty look. You can see the little dots on the front. They aren't like super strong. That definitely got rested on the paper. The paper is definitely abrasive. The bubble wrap is not. There. Touch-ups. You're always going to have to do a little bit of touch-up. But yeah, so little dots to kind of suggest a misty look. Otherwise, if you don't use dots, if you use a more solid, like stripy or streaky brush stroke, it won't look quite like it's soft like mist. Yep, stippling. Stippling for the win. You're very concerned for everyone but me. Yes. Oh, make an evil version. We actually do have an Efreet. Reaper makes an evil version. Quindy, do you have that link? You know who I mean, the big Efreeti, who's the... Bobby sculpted both an Efreet and a Genie. And the Efreet is definitely, like, the wicked part of the twin ship. Quindy will probably find the link for us in a second so you can see her. I don't have one, like, right at hand. She was a very popular model when she... Both of these are really popular models, actually, because they're really good sculpts. So we're getting our pink in there. Ah, there we go. Thank you, Zeba. Quindy with the link. Yeah, so I haven't yet painted the Efreet. Like, I've looked at her, I've thought about it, I just haven't quite... I've been waiting for a good color scheme to pop into my head. Like, for me, because I'm so color-oriented, it's all about the color. David was talking yesterday because it's so funny how we look at the Overwatch skins and he's like, I don't like it. I don't like green, orange, purple like you do, you know, because he has definite colors that he dislikes. And he just kind of looked at me yesterday and he's like, the thing with you is that you don't dislike any colors. And he's right. Like, I love colors in general, all colors. The only color that I have a dislike for is mint green. And even that one I'm coming around on. And mint green is my least favorite color because all my baby furniture was mint green, by the way. It's also just kind of a ugh color. But mint green is useful for one thing, and that is highlighting teals. Although I do think that the mintier it gets, the less I like it. So I'm just putting a little bit of shading here, guys, underneath this pink one so that I can bring up pink on that lobe right there. Yeah, Shadow Raven, I believe it. Because that's just hazardous, like, super hazardous. So more stipples, stipple, 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 stipple. You can also mix this pink again with a little bit more white and do an additional layer of stipples to kind of imply more mass or the shape of the object. So little tiny dots. This can take a while, but you're not doing the dots over everything. You're just really doing it on the areas where you want the magical smoky highlights. You're leaving the blue in between. This just so looks like rainbow cotton candy, doesn't it? Totally rainbow cotton candy genie. All about it. Yes, win. Win, in my opinion. Oh, I missed a spot with my wet blending here. So I'm going to try to kind of block it in with some blue. Sometimes if you don't look at the model from all angles and the model is really three-dimensional and really dynamic, you could totally miss spots that you needed to paint. And this happens. The missed a spot moment happens. Let's just say it happens to everybody, even me. Maybe especially me, because I get distracted. Squirrel. I'm definitely a squirrel kind of person. I have to focus and fight to keep my my attention span on something. Especially if something cute and fuzzy runs by. Hello, Carrie Michael. It does. It looks delicious. It looks, yes, totally. Totally looking delicious. Oh, I rubbed off that spot too. Let's get back on that. So I am resting the edge of the base on the, to get some of these upper areas on the paper, but that's not painted, so I'm not in danger of rub off there, so that's good. And just going to go back and forth and do stipples and stipples, kind of touch up some areas that I maybe lost a little bit of paint on with my pink. I don't really care if I'm like touching up this yellow-orange area with pink stipples because, well, you know, it's all cotton candy. So when it's rainbow, it doesn't matter. You could totally paint a unicorn like this and just do different sections of the body in different colors. And I wouldn't use the stippling. I would use like a traditional layering stroke to suggest the fur. But you could totally paint a unicorn like this. And every 5-year-old and 6-year-old girl in the world would love you for it. Again, I missed a point where I could do a little bit better blending. So since it's a small area, I can do it with my smaller brush. There we go. A little bit better. Here we are. Yay, wet blending. Yeah, I bet. Yeah, logging. Hey, Rex, how's it going? Rex, because I want to hold it without rubbing paint off. You guys just normally don't see me use this technique, the bubble wrap technique, because we're usually working on small models that fit on holders, or handles, as I like to call them. But this model is big enough that I cannot put it on a handle that is big enough without the handle being uncomfortable for me to hold because I have relatively small hands. So the bubble wrap is soft, easy to hold, comfortable, does not put pressure on the model to rub paints off, and the bubble wrap itself is non-abrasive, so it does not rub paint off. That is a summary. I went on at length earlier. Yeah, get in the OSHA side. There's some great people over there. We have a fantastic OSHA guy who works with Reaper. He's wonderful. And it's a great job because you're concerned about people's welfare, right? You're concerned about people's well-being. So if you get in like as an OSHA like educator, where you go around and talk to companies about, like an OSHA consultant, talk to them about safety, I think that would be a great job. He seems to really like it. I forget what his name is because I'm terrible with names. There. Just doing some reblending here. Yeah, a lot of people do the flaming ember hair with Ziva because her hair, it looks like fire, so it makes sense. Just like for me, painting this mini's hair like clouds makes sense. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's a good, I think it'd be a nice career, love. I mean, careers that let you actually, like, help people, I think are the best careers. That's actually why I love what I do. It's like I'm not helping people in a big cosmic way when I do these streams, but I'm helping people maybe love their hobby a little bit more. Or maybe if they're new to the hobby, I give them the tools not to be frustrated with it so it can become a real source of stress relief for them, which I think is a huge plus these days. Anything that can help you relieve stress in your life is like tops in my book. So that's part of why I love teaching miniature painting, is just that I feel like it really helps people. I had my eyes open to that back when I was in Baltimore, when I was living out there for a year. Because one of my friends out there had lupus, and she told me how much the hobby meant to her because she was usually able to do it, and it helped distract her from the pain of what she usually went through in a given day. So that was the first time I realized that, like, not just this hobby, any hobby, but, you know, miniature painting as a hobby, my hobby, could be really important and a part of, you know, life care for people, right? That it really does it can make a very profound difference. And miniature painting is like kind of a gateway art, right? Like if you're like me and you look at a piece of paper and you're like, what am I going to do with this blank piece of paper? But you love to do art, miniature painting is a way to get into the arts and be like collaborative, right? The sculpt is done for you. You just have to come up with the rest of the creativeness, which is easier than putting together both a sculpt and a paint job. So I feel like our hobby is a great gateway hobby for people who have always felt like they're not creative, but want to be creative, right? And it's a way to get into being creative without having to do a sketch in addition to a paint job. Yeah, exactly, love. That's exactly. Yeah, exactly, green users. Yeah, you guys get it. You guys totally get it. There's so many people in the world who think they're not creative, who are creative. It's just like some forms of creativity just require a really high entry level or a lot of work. Like, you know, I'm decent at sketching, but I still feel intimidated when I stare at a blank page, right? But a miniature, I feel all excited about. Like, it frees up my creativity. And I've gotten a lot better about 2D art. Like, I can actually, you know, I've done some sketches fairly recently that I'd like to color in, but I feel like this is a little bit more intimidating if you're starting, like if you really feel like you're not creative, but you feel like you want to be. Like, mini painting's just a great outlet for that. And maybe one of these days I'll get more into sculpting, but I just know it's going to take a lot of work for me to get as good at sculpting as I am at painting. And so that's why I've held off. I'm like, I'm not yet in a position to have the time and the energy to put that work in. Just doing some touch-ups here. Yeah, there is a lot of imposter syndrome in learning art. Exactly. Because people don't think they're creative. Maybe they were even told in school that they weren't very creative, right? That's the poison. People who tell you aren't very creative. God, you know, that just gets me. That burns my biscuits. To Bugs Bunny out on y'all. But yeah, so then they feel like, well, I'm not really creative. I'm not a real artist. I shouldn't do this, right? And that's not true at all. And I feel like the fine arts have kind of like sadly perpetuated this in many, many disciplines. Maybe not as much these days, but I think it's still there where there are gatekeepers and it's like, well, that's not real art, or, oh, well, you know, maybe you should just do something else. I hear about it a lot in writing, where a teacher's just like, you're not a very good writer, or something like that, or an instructor's like, yeah, don't quit your day job. And that's fair. Quitting your day job is pretty drastic, but yeah, don't let anybody tell you that you are or aren't creative. Just do what makes you happy and makes you feel good. Oh, yeah, yeah. Gotcha. Totally get it, love. Well, there's also, it's not going to go this year, but KublaCon is the local convention for gaming and painting. And that goes usually in the summer, over the Memorial Day, I think Memorial Day weekend, the beginning of summer. So that might be an option for you too, because a lot of us come out to enter the painting competition at that one and to like teach classes or whatever. So not this year, because obviously COVID and things are only just starting to open up, but they just sent out an email that next year is on. So we're looking forward to getting back into that. There we go. We got a nice pink swirly there. Yeah, you're going to see flaws, right? And then the challenge is just, it's the key is really, I mean, everybody always says enjoy the journey, right? But that's it. Like, get excited about getting better, right? Get excited about the little improvements that you see in your work. Like, nobody else is going to believe in your work. Like, sometimes you get a friend or a loved one who does really see your work and really believes in you, but that's like a gift, right? That's a total gift from them, and you can't depend on it. You shouldn't really depend on it. You should strive to be your own happy hot air balloon, your own lift, and try to just be happy with how far you've come, right? With every little improvement, every time you nail an effect and really think you like how it turned out, use that. Yeah, that happens all the time, Salmari. The most frustrating iteration of that is when you bring a model to a competition like ReaperCon. At ReaperCon, it's like more like an open juried show, so you can enter any number of models in each category, and a lot of people will enter multiple models. And it'll always be the model, the one that judges pick to judge, because they pick the model they think they can rate the highest. The one they pick to judge is always the one that you kind of phoned in, and the one that you spent all the time on is not the one that gets judged. And you just get, arg, you're just like, why? So that's where I see that all the time. And there will always be excellent reasons why the one that you felt you didn't do as well on will have been picked too. And when the judges bring it up to you, then you're like, oh. Because ReaperCon, we actually give feedback. You can go and talk to your judges after the event to find out why. And sometimes it'll have been a close thing, right? And maybe it was just one thing that they felt that you did better on the one model. But it's still super frustrating when you think, oh, I guess I'll enter this one just because I can enter it, even though this one was my real entry. And then the one that you kind of just decided wasn't as good turns out to be the one they think is best. Oh, yeah. Channel points. I know. Actually, John and Justin and everybody were working on that. They're still, I think, working on a system for channel points, love. I think even they were thinking about like giving, I don't know, there was a whole bunch of really awesome ideas they had for channel points, but I think they're just working out the kinks. Because if they're going to integrate it with anything like store discounts or something like that, then they've got to, obviously that's going to take some work. But I do know that there was some awesome things that they were thinking about doing with the channel points thing. And they had big plans, but they also have a Kickstarter to fulfill and ReaperCon coming up. And that means that everybody's overwhelmed. KublaCon's in the Bay Area downtown, Bob and Julie. So, like, it's in San Francisco. Out toward the water on the, maybe it's the east side, the Bay side. I don't remember. I've only been once. It's a nice small con. It's been running for a long, long time. They, when they had to cancel it, all these small cons were in real danger during the pandemic. But what essentially they did is they let people... Like, they offered to refund badges, but then told people, if you don't refund it so that we can still get through this year, we'll carry it over to the following year that we run the con, which was really nice, and it let them get through the year. Because small cons don't have a big cash cushion to get them through something like a pandemic. So a lot of people didn't ask for refunds because they wanted the con to move forward. So that's nice. Yeah, things keep happening. There's always something coming up and you don't have time to work on it. Yep, that's the world, right? Yeah, that's what I thought, John. That's what I thought. Yeah, Reaper's still working on it. It's just sometimes Reaper's always got so many things in the air. And we run, like, we're a much smaller company than a lot of people think. Like, if you've never been to Reaper, if you've never, like, seen the Reaper team, like, we get an amazing amount of stuff accomplished considering how small we are as a company. So, and often a lot of the stuff and changes that need to be implemented or a lot of the work that needs to be done is done by the same, like, 3 or 4 people. So, then you have to prioritize according to what Ed really says needs to get done, and things get done eventually. Just sometimes you got to give us a little more time. Yeah, the class tickets are not for sale yet because we still have actually Ron just opened it up to anybody who wants to teach to fill. Apparently we got a lot of people teaching classes, like an immense amount of classes though already signed up for, guys. So be excited. There's a lot of people teaching this year. A lot of great things to learn. Just adjusting my wet blending. Sometimes I decide I want a better blend out the gate, and I don't want to have to come back in and stipple in shadows, so I'll putz with it a little bit to make it nicer. Oh noes! Yeah, projects that massive companies do with teams that are 1/10 the size. Exactly. Reaper Miniatures is full of superheroes. Yes. Exactly. Everything that Justin just said. How we do it, nobody knows. We don't even know. But yeah, Reaper is pretty crazy. In a good way. There we go. Got our nice swirls. Here, let's back out a little bit here. Yeah, and we've got some of that pink coming in. And I think this little bit here. Yeah. That's kind of, it's like it could be your hair, this little thing here. Yeah, I think I'm gonna make that hair, actually. I'm gonna bring it down. Hold on. Let me actually get this area around her hand, though, because this, I think, is her side. There's these little nooks and crannies sometimes on a model where you may not, like, map them in right away. Like this little tiny area of her thigh under her hand. But now is the time to pay more attention to that. So, boom. Just doing a little bit of a wet blend to get a little bit of a highlight there. And then we'll rock that out. Ooh. Ooh, it's time. It's time to, like, close out the stream. Dang. So what we did today, yeah, because I need to watch that Overwatch 2 special, so that means I need to actually, like, get my button gear. Get my other stuff done for the day. Oh no! Wet blending gone awry, and my brush is all over the place. Wet paint. There we go. Much better. Wet paint solves all things. Yeah, it's crazy the things that Reaper manages to pull together. That's just having a team of really good people there. Small team of really, really cool people. Reaper's like everybody's favorite small town that gets bigger but manages to keep that small town feel. Alrighty, what we did today. We wet blended. We talked a lot about wet blending. We got the hair all to be a nice, cloudy gray set base so that I can now bring it up to white like I'm doing on the top. And we blocked in a lot of our blues, our swirlies down here on the bottom, and we started putting in some of our pastel stipples like we did on the other side. So we can do a lot of pastel stippling probably next time. Maybe we'll do some hair. We're getting real close on her. We're getting closer. She's coming along. So let's back out so you can see her clearly. Thank you, everybody who stuck around from the raid and everybody who showed up to the stream. I am Anne. And, yeah, we'll be here tomorrow. Tomorrow, Friday, we're working on our Monique, a little chibi vampire. She's adorbs, and we're getting really close to done on her, actually. We'll probably do non-metallic metal gold tomorrow. On her shield and her sword and her armor. So, all right, who are we going to raid today, Reaper? Yeah, the genie is very pretty. I'm very happy with how she's turning out. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. It is a good day. It is a good day. Today's coffee day. Oh, and I'll be streaming on my own channel, twitch.tv/paintingbig later today as well, guys. At about 4 p.m. Reaper, or 4 p.m. Central USA time. All right. Ooh, Paul Pape Designs. Awesome. Have fun, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow morning or later today.